Welcome to Just Saying, a podcast produced by and recorded at Tri-State Worship Center. Now here are your hosts, Holly Schneider and Pastor Terry Wagner.
Welcome to Just Saying, where we talk about real world issues.
Said well.
Nailed it.
Through the lens of Scripture. And this season we've been talking about a lot of hot button issues concerning politics and different things like that. We have found out that I am a conspiracy theorist. We haven't found that out. We've just publicly made it known.
Confessed it.
Yes. Which that's nice. In the room with me, we have Pastor Terry,
Yo.
a.k.a. the Padre, the man,
Yes,
the myth,
I am.
the legend.
In my own mind.
Yes, welcome. And also the sound magician,
Tyler.
Tyler Staten, or
Hey.
as I have him in my phone, as Ty Ty.
Ty.
Because I heard somebody
yeah.
call him Uncle
Well,
Ty
Yeah,
Ty.
I've been called Uncle
Well,
Ty
no, I was
Ty
going
for
to
a
say
long time.
your mom will be happy if she listens to this.
Yeah, ever since I heard that, I don't even remember who it was. Somebody called him Uncle Ty Ty, and I was like,
Well, I've heard his mom
he
call
is
him Ty.
totally
Ty.
going in my phone.
She calls me Ty Ty.
As Ty Ty. My thing is sometimes I'll put people in my phone under certain things and I'll forget. Like Scotty Smith, little Scotty Smith came to concession stands with Brett the Hitman Hart glasses on. And I put him in my phone as Brett the Hitman Hart. and every time I go to look for him, I can never find him.
I can't find
Scotty.
him. I can't find him in my phone because he's in my phone as Chubbs.
Oh, yeah, there you go. All right. Well, today is going to be an interesting day.
Most interesting of many days. Yeah.
Yes. We are going to talk about what I consider to be one of the highest topics when it comes to this current political race.
The hottest of hot buttons.
Yes. Which is abortion. So, where do you even start?
Where do you
right?
start?
At the beginning.
It's so interesting
Well,
because
good.
I feel like if you would ask a lot of people, do you even know where this came from? I'm sure a lot of people would be like, yeah, it was somebody who was like fighting for the women's rights and blah, blah, blah. And like, that's totally not what happened.
No.
This woman, her name was not Roe.
Right.
It was a fake name.
Norma McCorvey.
Yep.
We can say it.
Norma McCorvey, who's now dead.
Passed,
Yes. She got pregnant for a third time, unwed.
Mm-hmm.
She had already given up her first two children for adoption. And the third child, she wanted an abortion, lived in Texas, where they had some strict laws. And she went to a lawyer to see if she had any grounds to stand on. And he pointed her to these two women to take this case because they were already trying to find women who wanted abortions and couldn't have them for this case. So all of this went through. She didn't even attend a hearing, not one hearing. Like this woman, this huge decision that has just rocked our world.
Right.
This woman was not, and then she ended up becoming pro-life
Right. For a season.
and never had an abortion.
Or as they say, the poster child left the poster.
Yes.
Yeah.
Never had an abortion. The daughter that she wanted to abort ended up being adopted. And later she had tried to have a relationship with her, I guess. And there's a quote saying that she asked her daughter to thank her for not aborting her. And
Wow.
yeah. So it's just, the whole thing is just crazy to me because it is all about, like, people make it all about, like this brave woman, like, did this amazing thing, when it was really had nothing to do with that. Like, she had mental health problems. She was on drugs. Like,
Well, and
she just didn't want a baby.
and we're maybe jumping ahead, but the ruling in Texas really wasn't even about abortion. It was about privacy.
Privacy, yeah.
That's, I mean, again, she was saying, or her lawyers were saying, that this was she had a right to privacy, and that no one needed to know the business of whether she
Because
was
she tried to say that she was raped,
right.
which was ended up coming out that was not true.
Correct. And she lived a homosexual lifestyle.
Yes.
But did had slept with men.
Obviously.
Well, some people would say no, not obviously.
How's that obviously?
I know it. Biology.
I mean, I know I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, come on.
You mean you didn't watch that one show?
No. So yeah, then it brought us to 50 some years.
Yeah.
Where abortion was taken, out of the state's hands, put into the bigger picture where they were, not able to regulate it as much. And then it got overturned.
Yeah.
And when that happened, it went back to the states.
Right.
And that's what everybody's all up in arms about currently.
Right.
Did I miss anything? I'm sure I missed a lot of things.
I think that's a really good summary that you gave. And,
Thank you, sir.
There's a lot of things about our country, not just abortion, but there's a lot of things about our country that really should be states' issues. If you want to go back and talk about the Civil War, that a big part of the Civil War was fought because of states' issues, and not federalist or this big government picture thing, and so issues like this, number one, shouldn't be an issue. Ty and I were talking before. Before we started, and this shouldn't even be an issue, right? Well, hopefully we'll get to that here in a minute. It shouldn't be an issue, but it's an issue that should be decided on the state level. Somebody said, well, what happens if a state just has open door abortion policy when everybody moves to that state? Think about the ramifications. Electoral college, right? I mean, it really does go to everything in the fiber of America. But I think it is where it should be, and that is on a state level. It should not be a constitutional right. It should not be a federal issue. Our tax dollars, regardless of whether you are pro-choice or pro-life, tax dollars should not be going for that activity, for that particular procedure.
It's funny because, a lot of people are like, well, before the Civil War, abortions were legal and there was never an issue with it. The natives, had their way of doing abortions naturally and different things like that. And I'm just like, well, there was a lot happening before the Civil War, like slavery and why are we going all the way back there to be like, oh, well, they did it, so it must be okay.
Well, and that, again, I'm serious. This probably will turn into episode 4A and 4B because there's just too much to cover. But I have a undergraduate degree from Marshall University. It's a 4-year degree in nothing that took me 7 years to get.
We're very proud of you.
Thank you very much. And I'm sitting in a deviance and society class. They have a special guest that comes in because we're going to talk about homosexuality. In my years at Marshall, I did not make it known that I was in ministry. That just invites a lot of things that I really wasn't interested in. And so I just would take a class and just, get my grade and move on. This particular class, though, the special guest for that class was someone who was homosexual. Well, of course, they're there to promote their view. And that's okay. I want to be informed. I want to be educated. Tell me. And they use that example is, well, from the beginning of time, men have been with men and just goes down to and still today in Asia, I just couldn't take it no more. I sat there and I'm steaming. I finally raised my hand and they call on me and I said, we've been lying and killing people since the beginning of time, and that doesn't make it right.
Right.
That's just a terrible argument.
Yeah.
Well, we've always done it. Well, that don't make it right.
Right. That's so true. And a lot of times I will make the point of, children who get abused. Like it literally it's happened for generations upon generations upon generations, and now they're literally trying to normalize it, like giving it a psychological name.
That's what we do, don't we?
Yeah.
We somehow give it a medical. It's a disease.
Mm-hmm.
It's a behavior that now gets a title, and then we want to figure out how to treat the disease and the behavior, and we forget about the fact it's just wrong.
Yeah.
No, it's wrong. Period. And it doesn't matter if it's something that's always happened. Two wrongs never make a right.
Right.
That's what my mama told
But
me.
two rights make a left.
Wait a minute.
I'm just joking. I don't know.
Oh, I was going to say, I thought you was pulling a Ricky Bobby on me there or something. I didn't know what was going on.
So,
Three rights make a left.
Tyler's just there was so much going on.
I saw his eyes roll back in his head.
How many rights make a
I was
left?
trying to keep them from going crossed.
Hey,
as I
Siri.
was thinking about this.
Don't say that. My
Oh
phone will
no,
go crazy.
my phone just did. So when everything was overturned, the people who were on the side of pro-choice acted like it was the end of the world,
Right.
and that abortion was illegal, which is not the case. So can you tell me what the overturning of it really meant for our country? Because it didn't make anything illegal, right?
No, it didn't. It sent it back where it should have been, which we've already said. It sent it back to the states. There was a case in Mississippi where Mississippi had made a law that there was no abortions after 15 weeks.
15 weeks, yeah.
And they tried to overturn that, and in trying to overturn it, sent it back to the Supreme Court. Well, for the Supreme Court to withhold and say yes, that's okay, they had to overturn Roe v. Wade, which is why they call it the Dobbs thing, is because that for them to say yes, that's okay, Mississippi, you can do that, they had to overturn their previous decision, and that wasn't the only reason. There was some judges on the court that felt like that the original decision had some errancy to it, that it wasn't a good decision at the time, and of course I don't think it was a good decision at the time. But that's what happened. But it did not say abortion is illegal. It was saying we're going to send it back to the states and let the states decide. Well, this is one of the things I thought about when I knew this was going to be the subject. Is as hard as everybody would fight for the constitutional right or whatever it was that you want to call it, that they have abortion. Well, now it's just sent back to states for the states to decide. But in that same, and I'll call it the law of the land, people don't want to support that.
Right.
They only want what they want, right? And as long as it was a nationwide constitutional, then yeah, let's rally and let's do it. Then suddenly when the same Supreme Court that said Roe v. Wade was okay, right? That same Supreme Court said, no, now we're going to send it back to the states, and it puts everybody up in arms.
Right.
And I'm saying, no, let's let it travel its course. Now let's go to the states and go to the state level. And really, unfortunately, there's even some things happening on the state level that I still don't agree with. But I do think that's where it's supposed to be. But you're right; it doesn't make it illegal. It just puts it in the hands of the people that are closer to the trenches, if I can say it that way.
Right. Because it's obviously different states have different types of people and economic statuses and different things like that.
Red states, blue states.
Yes, all that.
Yeah.
So why do you feel like this is still just such a huge, huge issue? Like, I mean, it is such a sensitive topic that, like, people who are all about, Christianity and biblical beliefs feel like it's wrong. And then you have the other side of it that say it's not about religion, it's about women's rights. And so why is it such an issue that people are just so passionate about it?
Well, I think, a couple of things we have to do is to lay some some background down, or some groundwork, if you want to say that. You said at the beginning of the podcast. This podcast is life issues through the lens of the Bible, right? That's so. I want to make sure and say this right up front, because I know we'll probably get some blowback on this episode, and that's fine. But people need to understand we're talking about this issue with a biblical worldview.
Yeah.
All right, that right off the top sets us in conflict or contrast against a whole nother side of people, right? It's a biblical worldview. This belief is based on and informed by the Bible and what I think the Bible says. Now, here's where we need to, and again, I just lay it out there. I think that, number one, life begins at conception. I know that there's some that say, well, it's about viability. It's about whether a fetus can survive. Until a fetus can survive, then it's not life. Well, none of that can happen without conception. You have to have conception. So I think life begins at conception. How does conception work? Well, of course, we all know how that works, because
Go on.
God made them male and female, right? And told them to what? Replenish the earth. And that's how that happens, is the two become one, and the one is a child that has both mother and father as part of who they are. So and I hope that we have a mature enough audience that I can say this. You know, the act of sexual intercourse happens millions of times a day where there is not conception. Okay. So my biblically informed worldview says that in some of those cases, God says life, 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 right? Not in all the cases, because, I mean, talk about a population boost. I mean, boom, that would be. So I think God decides when there's life, and that life begins at conception. Now, a lot of people want to throw a lot of other issues in to say that abortion needs to be legal because of incest and because of rape. And I'm a little bit of a history buff, and I know Holly is. You know, in the Holocaust, there were young Jewish girls impregnated by German guards. And there were Jewish doctors or Jewish midwives that would offer to have those pregnancies aborted, but they wouldn't allow it. They wouldn't do it because they thought that was wrong. And so they even back in that situation, as horrible as that, I cannot imagine how horrible that was, how awful that was. But still, God's the one who decided where there's life and where there's not. I mean, and if I'm going to be consistent, I can't sit here and say, well, I'll put in a few exceptions and make it okay.
Right.
I can't do that. So I think it becomes a hot button when people realize that to be a follower of Christ means that I surrender my will to His will. Thy will be done, my will be gone. And we live in a world where we have to have our rights. We got our right. We have put abortion rights at the level, actually above the level of civil rights. Right? I mean, it's just that much of a hot button, and people want to talk about that. Incest and rape and those mothers' health. And the truth of the matter is about 4% of abortions that have been performed since 1973, 4% would include rape and incest, risk to the mother's life, or other physical health concerns, right? Abnormality of the baby. 96% is because it's elective. I don't want a baby. I'm not ready for a baby. I can't afford a baby. And so instead of making a choice before, they want to make the choice afterwards. My body, my choice. And kind of, and again, I'm going to say this. I'm sure it'll make some folks upset. It's like thumbing their nose at God and saying, you can say that this is life, but then I make the decision that's not. Now, I said all that, and I really meant to say this very early in the podcast. God is a loving God. And if you've had an abortion, I am sitting here right now saying to you that that is forgivable.
Yeah.
Take that to the Lord, and He will take that away from you. I remember being at a church, and part of the sermon, this issue came up, and I made that comment. I said, if you've ever had an abortion, it's not the end of the world. You just need to come to Jesus and let Him love you, and let Him forgive you for that. And I had 3 people that came to me after the service and saying, I've never heard anybody say that, and I'm one of those people, and I'm so thankful that you said it. So I'm saying to anybody that hears this podcast that has suffered through that decision and unfortunately that procedure, that it's not the end of the world. You take that to Jesus and let Him love you through it. Let a church love you through. I know that maybe not every church would be as Jesusable as they should be.
I'm not sure that's a word.
I just made it up.
Okay.
But it's a hot button because we think that we are supposed to be in charge of everything. We want what we want. We want it now. You can't tell me what to do. It's my body, my choice, all those things. And I feel like, and I don't mean to do all the talking here, but I feel like what they've done now is they've repackaged it. It's no longer abortion. It's women's health.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And even the statistics tell us that, no, it's not about women's health.
It's so crazy because here's what happens. So all of a sudden then they've started talking about IVF.
Right.
And then they're like, we're not going to be able to get birth control, and we're not going to be able to do this, and we're not going to be able to do that. And I'm like, no one has said any of those things. Like it's fear mongering. Like they just want to instill fear, like they're, no one's going to control me type of thing.
Right.
And the whole that it's not life until the cells can, sustain themselves. The best argument for that, in my opinion, that I've heard is, my 7-year-old son cannot sustain himself.
Right.
So
well, my 65-year-old self can't sustain us.
He doesn't have a job. He has to be fed. He has to be told when to shower. He has to be driven everywhere. He cannot sustain life without his parents. Like, if you dropped him off in the middle of the woods, he would not survive. And so for someone to say, well, until those cells can survive on their own, when is that?
Right.
I can't abort or kill my 7-year-old son because because I don't think he can survive on his own. Like, that's just the most ignorant, to me, excuse, because, like, who's to say when that is? Who's to say where that line is?
Right.
I mean, so to me, if you can't have that line and have a boundary, then I don't feel like that's a good reasoning.
Right.
Well, and to further your point, you have some even grown adults who have developmental delays.
Absolutely.
Who still can't.
Yeah.
Well, and again, I know we're like way ahead when I say this, but I mean that's where the road leads to. Then is not just aborting a fetus, which, by the way, I was going to do the paper flipping like Rush Limbaugh used to do, but the very definition of abortion, and this is right from Webster's, I didn't make this up, the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by death. Well, how can something die
If it's not alive.
if it's not alive?
Yeah.
Right? And so what's going to happen is, if this issue does not get some reins put on it and pulled back a little bit, we are going to get to the point where people that have special needs are going to be at risk.
Yeah.
And older people, that get to a point, like you said, Holly, that can't take care of themselves anymore, right? They're no longer really a productive part of society. Okay, well, that's time to move on from that.
Yeah.
Right.
And if we can numb ourselves to the point that 1 million babies a year are being aborted, if we can numb ourselves to that and it not touch us and it not convict us, then these other avenues, I think, are just waiting around the corner for somebody to say, well, okay, we've done this now. Here we can go over here and do this. And that's really the problem with most anything that's outside of God's plan for us, is that once we crack the door open, it just becomes that slippery slope, and it becomes much bigger. And I said this, I don't know if it was last episode or not, but everything used to be downstream from the church. And now it's all switched around. The church really doesn't seem to have an influence on anything anymore. And too many people in the church are just not standing up for what's right. What God says is right. And that is, as you've done under the least of these. Well, how much more least of these can you get than the unprotected fetus in the womb? I mean, as you've done under the least of these, you've done it unto me. And that has to strike our hearts. It has to, because if it doesn't, we're going to set back with every other social issue that's running through the church now and say, well, God's a God of love, and He understands, and it's going to be okay, and He's not going to punish people for things that are violating His laws. You cannot be serious right now. I mean, even go, and this is out of bounds. Go to theory of evolution. Why? My opinion. This is Terry Wagner's opinion. The whole purpose of the theory of evolution is to say I got here without God. Because if I can say that, if I say I'm here, there was a single cell amoeba that was floating around in primordial soup, got struck by lightning, and here I am. God had nothing to do with it, then anything I think or do or say is okay, because God's not part of the picture anymore. I got here without Him.
Right.
And listen to me. In the beginning, God created everything.
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 It's true.
Everything.
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 And here's what's crazy. I feel like I've said that at the beginning of every sentence.
Yeah, you have.
Here's what's crazy.
What's crazy, Holly, is conspiracy.
It's going to be my tagline. You want to know what's crazy? Here's what's crazy. So the whole women's rights thing, while I was researching for this, I read this and I was like, oh, that's really smart. You have actresses who get up and they're all about, pro-choice, and one of them in particular, I remember she got up and said if it she won like an Emmy or something, I don't remember. If it wasn't for my abortion, I wouldn't be here today. Like that's
For real?
Yes. And I was like, isn't it more womanly? I don't know if that's the correct way to say it.
Well, I made
for
up a
you
word.
to be able to be successful and have a family, like we talk about how strong women are for bearing children, and we're this and we're that, but at the same time they put restrictions on themselves by saying, I can't be, I have to choose my career over having a baby, or I have to choose this over, having a baby, and so it's just not the right time, or it's just not this. But doesn't that defeat the point of being a woman?
Well, yes, but again, we're allowing culture, we're allowing the world to redefine that, to redefine what it is to be a woman.
What is
Matter
a
of fact,
woman?
according to what was your tagline again?
You know what's crazy?
You know what's crazy is, and again, I know that this sounds like I'm being mean. I don't mean it in a mean way, but the simple fact is, I can define myself any way I want to right now.
Yeah.
I could say I'm a woman.
You could say you're a woman. You could say you're a young 13-year-old boy.
Yes, or a cat.
Or a cat.
Seriously. I mean, And I mean it is. I agree. It's funny and sad because that's the world we live in. Yeah. That somebody comes in and introduces themselves and says, "Hi, I'm John, and my pronouns are," whatever. And if you there was a video floating around of a Delta Airlines. I don't know if you've seen it. Delta Airlines and the ticket attendant was referring to the person, which you can't see the person, so I don't know what the person looked like. They're just videoing, which is another thing that they do. They want to get everything on video so they can champion their cause. And the ticket person said something about like, well, can I see your boarding pass, sir, or something like that. You just misgendered me. You just misgendered me. I mean, and then it becomes 10 minutes of you've misgendered me. You've misgendered. Come on, there's two genders. there's men and there's women. That's it. There aren't other ones. But I'm allowed to now define myself any way I want to.
I've seen one like that where the person's going to all these different restaurants and they're like complaining on their food and thank you, sir, or whatever. It's not sir. Please, he just called me sir.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a man.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, I go through the drive-through at McDonald's, and for years. I mean, if depending on who's handing me my food, thank you, man, right? Or I would say like thank you, young lady, or I stop myself now and think I can't even say that anymore.
I still do it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
And so
I tell students when I'm sending students out on job interviews, I remind them, shake their hands, look them in the eye. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Go a long way.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but I'm
I'm
not convicted about that.
I think you should be doing that. I think more of us need to go back and quit trying to redefine the lines. Quit trying to say that I am not who God made me. I'm not saying people don't struggle with those things. Of course they do. I'm not saying that there's not men out there that are effeminate in nature. I'm not saying that. I'm saying biologically we are men and women. Period. That's it.
I agree. And again, you said everybody has their own personal journey, whatever. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But don't be upset with me because
that's the other part. Yeah,
I'm not letting my eyes deceive me. You know, I see what I see. And at the end of the day, I'm just trying to be polite. I'm just trying to, so why make me feel bad about that,
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing. What's crazy is...
What's crazy, Holly?
People are like, let's say I'm, pro-life. And why are you pro-life? Well, because that's how I believe, biblically, all the things that you've said. And then their comment is, well, isn't there a separation between church and state? Why are you bringing religion into it?
See that's a not smart statement. I was going to say ignorant, but that'd be bad. That whole issue is taken out of complete context.
Right.
There is no wall there. That was Thomas Jefferson writing to the Dansbury Baptist Church about how the fact that they would be able to practice their religion without the inclusion of or involvement of or the government coming in and telling them what to do.
Yeah.
It wasn't saying that the government should. Matter of fact, if you know Thomas Jefferson at all, he was a Christian man. So many of the founding fathers had such a huge Christian, Judeo-Christian ethic about them. I'm reading a book by David Barton, The American Story, and I mean, I wish we had leaders today like we had back then. I just wish we had leaders that weren't afraid to stand up and say, God is God, I'm a man, and I'm willing to risk my life for this country to be great. Instead, we sure are headed the wrong way.
I mean, when the Roe versus Wade got overturned and got turned back to the states, there was a female comedian, and she took to, I saw it on Instagram, but I mean, she went on this rampage about how it was all the Christians' fault and that we shouldn't be shoving, our religion down their throats and, I mean, just awful. It was very obviously derogatory and just, it was a horrible, but it's like, I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me why Christians can't have an opinion without it being so attacked. You know what I'm saying?
You're not allowed to have an opinion unless it matches their opinion. And unfortunately, this comedian, whoever this was that was saying, unfortunately, 63% of Americans, which includes a lot of Christian people, believe it's okay, that abortion is a necessary thing that we should have as
Right.
part of it. So, no, it's not just the Christian. Yeah, I wish the Christians would stand up. I had someone text me this week, hey, when is the right to life life chain? And I said, well, I think it's the first Sunday in October. It's normally when it is. And they said, just wanted to make sure I didn't schedule a vacation around that during that time because I want to make sure I'm there. Of course, Christians are they're going to make their schedules reflect something that's going to be supportive of life because we believe in life. And why can't we have that opinion, Ty, without being blasted for that, right? I'm saying that that's my opinion. I'm not sitting here saying that people who believe in abortion, people who support abortion, people that have had abortion, I'm not degrading or saying I'm not saying anything about them. I'm saying here's what I believe.
Right. And just as much as they are going to stick to their guns,
Yeah.
we are allowed to stick to ours, and that's what.
But do we?
Yeah, I've had conversations upon conversations with just several different people who have said to me, "You make everything a spiritual issue." Yes.
Hello?
Because to me, everything is a spiritual issue, right? That's my foundation. And if something's going wrong or something's going awry, then that's the first thing I'm going to go to. Where am I spiritually? What is going on spiritually? How can I fix this spiritually? I'm going to go to the Word. And the same thing when it comes to issues like this. I'm not going to just go with whatever's popular. I'm going to go with what I feel like Christ wants me to do.
Right.
And if I don't do that, then I'm not a true follower of Christ. And as much as they are the opposite, why is it not okay for me to be the way I am? Like,
What did James say? James, the half brother of Jesus, said, "The double-minded person is unstable in all their ways."
Oh,
Right? And then we have people that will say, "Well, my secular job is this, and my spiritual path is that." What is that?
or they say I don't want to mix my church or my opinion or my Christianity with this or that. Yeah. Try to keep it all separate.
Right, and you can't. I agree with you. Every decision, everything in life, I want that to be God pleasing. I want it to be God centered.
Yeah.
Do I always do? Of course not. I don't always make it the right way.
Oh, don't be modest.
Well, I'm just being truthful. We had this conversation in a men's meeting last night. The saying, "I'm a sinner saved by grace." I don't like that because when I say I'm a sinner, I'm identifying myself as a sinner.
I'm just a
Stop it. And you know what I got to say about that? What is it?
Saved by grace.
No, your tagline. No thing.
You know what's crazy?
You know what's crazy about that? Is I was a sinner that I now have been saved by grace, but old things have passed away.
I'm not a sinner, yeah.
I don't want to identify that, but yet I do think that mentality can be destructive, and to the point where I do try to divide my life up into compartments. You can't do it.
No.
How you treat your spouse should be based on what the Bible says. How you treat your children should be based on what the Bible says. How you treat your boss. Let all you do it as unto the Lord. I mean, I don't see how anybody can say, well, I'm going to take my spiritual compartment box out and I'm going to set it over there for a minute while I decide about abortion. Mm-hmm. I don't see how anybody can do it.
And the crazy thing about that is...
No. We got to come up with your own.
We're going to have to... After this season, we're going to start a whole new podcast called You Know What's Crazy? But just because man says something is okay, even if everybody agrees, what is it you say? A lie is a lie.
Right.
Even if everyone believes it and the truth is the truth, even if no one believes it.
Yeah.
Even if at the end of the day, everybody on earth agrees that abortion is okay, the Bible still says that it's not.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you're changing your mind based on what humans are saying is crazy.
Yeah. So, like, oh my goodness.
That's all right. We got 4 minutes. Go
Okay,
ahead.
4 minutes. I'm not going to get to my last question. We'll save it for episode B.
I told you.
That's one of the craziest things to me is for murder to be illegal, right? Scott Peterson, he's been really big because there's big documentaries about him. He was charged with the murder of his wife and his unborn child.
Right.
And the only difference is because his wife may, or we don't really know, but supposedly wanted the baby, right? Because she was like 8 months pregnant.
Yeah.
But, depending on what state she was in, she could have changed her mind.
Right.
But he was still charged with that murder. My brain cannot compute that.
Yeah.
I don't understand how one thing can be right and another thing can be wrong.
I think we mentioned at the tail end of the last
we
episode.
did. If the attorney could have proved that she didn't want the baby, could he have,
Right,
and just been a single homicide?
Yeah.
That is crazy to think about.
Yeah, and again, like you said, though, where there does not seem to be just black and white, now we've allowed this gray area that says, well, it depends on what state you're in. Depends on whether a person could prove that she wanted to keep that baby or not. It depends on, like the guy in Atlanta, the drunk driver hit the lady head on, killed her and her eight-month-old baby that she's carrying, and he got charged with double homicide. Well, I don't. That makes no sense to me either. I mean, how can you say that's not life, but then say when charge you with homicide, which is taking of life?
Right. That's where my brain doesn't compute.
Going cross-eyed again.
Two
Tyler,
rights.
Tyler,
make a
come
left.
back, Tyler, come back.
Because that is just so, it's so contradictory. Like it doesn't, there's no way to justify that. Like you cannot sit down and say, well, this is why, because it literally, in order to prove one, you have to disprove the other, right?
Yeah.
In order to say, well, that was a life, then you'll have to say it was a life, but they don't think that's murder, and I just don't understand.
Even going back to that Webster's definition of abortion, the termination of a pregnancy after, accompanied by, resulting in, or closely followed by the death of the fetus. Again, how can there be death
if there's no life?
If there's no life,
Right.
And if you're going to argue that it has to be viable, which is self-sustaining, it goes back to the argument that you already made, which was we got a lot of people that can't do it on their own.
Right. I mean, when all of it started, for a long time, it was like, the first 15 weeks or up until, a heartbeat.
Yep.
But now it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, and people are like, well, nobody's having abortions, in month 9. That's not true.
They are. They are.
And then you have people who are like, well, women are dying because doctors are afraid to do it. No, that's not. I mean, they take a I can't say the word.
Hippocratic oath.
There you go. There we go.
Thank you, Tyler.
And so no, if a woman comes in and her life is in danger, I feel like that's a whole different situation. Yeah. And I know it gets the title of abortion because, whether it's, an ectopic pregnancy or, something's wrong with the baby or stillbirth or things like that. I feel like that's a whole different medical thing than just walking in and choosing to terminate a child.
Well, that was my point back about 40 minutes ago was, 96% of the abortions are elective.
Elective, yeah.
It's elective. It's not because of mother's health. It's not because of deformity of the fetus. It's not for any of those. It's just because I'm not ready, can't afford it, don't like the guy. Right. I mean, people would say that's being a little kiddish about it, but no. I mean, I went out and had dinner with a guy, and we ended up, and this is probably where we need to wait till next episode. But if we would go with God's plan, none of this would be an issue. Right. God's plan is, let's have sex inside of marriage. Period. Let's do it that way, and He says it should be a good thing. It should be a good thing. He created male and female. And He said it's good that that's what He did. I want to say this, but we got to quit. I know we have to quit. It's a shame. It's a shame that we have about 35% of Protestant evangelicals that would say abortion is okay.
Blows my mind.
35%. We on a Sunday morning, we have a little over 200 in our worship service. And when I stop and think about 35% of them thinking that abortion is okay, I feel like I have failed. Mm-hmm. Totally failed. Because it is my number one issue when it comes to voting. Mm-hmm. I'm going to look at abortion platforms. Somebody said, "You're being too political." No, abortion to me has nothing to do with politics. Abortion to me is moral, spiritual, biblical. It has nothing to do with political. And so I'm looking for, and I wish we could find that person. As far as I know, on the political landscape, there's not that person that says 100%
right.
We're not having abortions anymore. Nobody's saying that. Mm-mm. Again, I mean, that's sad. Now, I do look for the people that, at least want to put some guardrails up,
right.
and not just offer free ones at your convention. That, again, blows my mind. That's what people are going to make their mind up over. They're going to make their mind up over who to vote for based on who's going to give me the right to terminate a pregnancy. Mm-hmm. And that pregnancy can't be terminated unless it's life.
Right.
And God's the one who decides when there's life. God's the one who decides. We don't decide that.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be a terrible place, wouldn't it, if God gave us the right to decide?
Yeah.
It would be like that Morgan Freeman when he played God, mm-hmm. God Almighty, Bruce Almighty.
Bruce Almighty.
And he lets Jim Carrey be God for a couple of days, and he's trying to get Jennifer Aniston to love him.
Yeah.
Love me. And she don't even know he's there. She just keep walking. Can you imagine if we really did have, what kind of chaotic world we'd live in if we had the right to decide those things?
We're already seeing some of that.
Yeah, we are. Absolutely. Well, because 35% of the people that are supposed to be holding the banner of life up, 35% of them are saying, no, I think it's okay. And I wonder, and this question for next episode, I wonder how many of that 35% are just doing it just out of peer pressure, just peer pressure. I don't want to make my workmates upset. I don't want to make my family, maybe someone in my family who says abortion should be okay, so I'm just going to go along with it because I don't want to trouble the waters any.
Yeah.
And instead of just standing up, listen, I'm here to say, I believe in life. If you're offended at that, I don't apologize. I believe in life, and I believe God's the giver of life, and I don't think any of us have the right to decide that we're going to stop that.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to just continue this.
Episode 5, Part B, or whatever.
4, Part B.
4, Part B.
Because I do have other questions. I want to talk about IVF. I do want to talk about Plan B. And then also talk about how a Christian could justify supporting abortion, and we can get into all of that next time. So thank you for being with us today, and hopefully you will catch us on the continuation of this discussion on abortion, and we hope that.
And if somebody out there listening has some questions or some comments you'd like to make, please send them. TWAGNER, twagner977@gmail.com.
Yes, do that.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today. Like, follow, share, all of those things.
Rate, review.
Yes. Yeah. Have a wonderful time.
See ya.
Bye.